Urgent! Minsk is on fire! The opposition has seriously angered Lukashenko. Oreshnik has become a verdict for him. And on top of that, Zelensky struck at Belarus. Lukashenko is losing ground beneath his feet. The regime is cracking like ice in spring. Kyiv has shown Minsk's new master. This happened live on air. The finale is already near. Public discontent is growing. The elites are nervous and the dictator himself is floundering. Putin is in a panic. All the cards are on the table. The deployment of training grounds and the transport of Oreshnik became the last straw. Ukraine is methodically closing in on Putin. The world understood the signal. More on all this ahead. Stay tuned until the end. Welcome, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Andriy Silikov. And here are the latest events. Urgent! The leader of the Belarusian opposition, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, has revealed shocking truths about what is happening behind the closed doors of Minsk. Lukashenko is trying to play the role of a nuclear king, but the walls of his fortress may be empty. We
do not have evidence that these weapons are already in Belarus, but they are always present in the region. They are provoking and want to appear stronger. They want Europe to pay more attention to its own security, rather than, for example, helping Ukraine.
Tikhanovskaya made a bold statement after information was spread by the media. It was reported that Belarus had deployed elements of the Oreshnik medium-range ballistic missile system at the site of the former naval airfield Krychau 6, where active infrastructure deployment is still ongoing.
At some point, Russia may gradually begin to deploy counter-sabotage units and specialized divisions in Belarus, without which the deployment of such weapons would be impossible. The Russians even store these mobile launchers and guard them as if they were the back of their own hand.
Let us note that not so long ago, the Russian Ministry of Defense proudly announced that the Oreshnik missile system had officially entered combat duty in Belarus. As if to say,
if you take a close look at the horizon, you can see that there is a massive, formidable nuclear-powered monster currently stationed alongside NATO forces right here in the coastal waters of Portugal. This imposing vessel represents a significant military presence in the region, serving as a powerful deterrent and a clear signal of the strategic alliance's strength and commitment to maintaining security across the Atlantic theater during these increasingly uncertain times. In terms of tactical training, tactical specialized training, the personnel have already proven their professionalism in practice during scheduled exercises.
Even here, Putin is getting others to do his dirty work for him. Despite the loud statements, suspicions quickly began to spread that the missile system likely did not actually pass into the hands of the Belarusian military. The Russian Ministry of Defense openly stated that all the infrastructure in Belarus was created for the Russian contingent, both for combat duty and for permanent deployment. The battle for life continues. Help is needed for a severely wounded hero. The doctors have already done everything possible. But ahead lies not just suffocation, but a series of complex surgeries. You can find all the details on how to help our defender in the description below the video. And we continue urgently. Volodymyr Zelensky has cut off the oxygen to the Belarusian dictatorship. Lukashenko is gasping for air, and it seems his regime is living out its final days. Ukraine is delivering the final blow and appointing a special representative for contacts with the democratic forces. Putin's ally is finally being overthrown.
It is necessary to support the efforts of the democratic forces of Belarus.
Kyiv's decisive statements are now being heard around the world. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has made it clear that relatives should prepare themselves. The wheel of retribution has been set in motion and it can no longer be stopped.
It is truly important for us to maintain relations with representatives of democratic Belarus. We believe that the time will come when Democratic Belarus, will become the fourth member of the Lublin Triangle.
A new and most importantly legitimate president of Belarus has already been chosen. Volodymyr Zelensky shook hands and the whole world was inspired by the feat. As we can see, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya's voice is becoming much louder. A historic moment. The Ukrainian president met with her in Vilnius. An intriguing moment and a clear signal. Discussion of further plans and receiving an invitation to visit Kyiv. Moreover, behind closed doors, they could have discussed the possibility of opening a criminal case against Lukashenko. And
with the help of the Belarusian opposition, Ukraine can initiate the process of submitting Lukashenko to an international investigation.
Volodymyr Zelensky does not hide his attitude toward the self-proclaimed leader of Belarus. The day before, the president of Ukraine publicly and without any courtesies criticized Lukashenko live on air. The sharp, emotional statement by the Ukrainian president shook the public space and made everyone more cautious.
Unfortunately, Lukashenko's white thread has been given more rights than the people of Belarus. There was a chance in 2020 to change this, and I am sure there will be another chance. But at that time, there simply wasn't enough support for Belarus. And now we all feel how much more difficult, how much more expensive, how much more dangerous it has become for everyone because of Belarus's dependence on Moscow. A dependence that is not decreasing.
Publicly, Zelensky emphasized that Putin is using the territory of a neighboring country as a testing ground to blackmail Europe and the world. With nuts, and not only that.
Operators of Russian rocket-launched Shaheds are working against Ukraine, including from the territory of Belarus. The launch sites for strikes are supported from Belarusian territory. Russia is using Belarus as a testing ground to blackmail Europe and the world with nuts.
The industrial sector in Belarus is actively supporting and fueling Russia's ongoing war. And these established commercial trade relationships help Putin procure the critical technological components needed to create serious threats against all of us throughout Europe.
Military training grounds, which also seem to be built for Belarus's needs, are yet another interesting aspect of the cooperation between the two dictators. Social networks exploded with news. Lukashenko is preparing to launch a new Putin-led aggression from his own territory. In the Gomel region, a new training ground is springing up before our eyes.
Satellite photos show that over the past month, the area has already undergone significant changes. The deforestation work is expected to be completed by the end of March 2026.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
At the same time, another alarming development is unfolding. A full-fledged military town is being established in the region. They plan to relocate a new airborne assault brigade there. The training ground will likely become a logical extension of this military configuration. All of this is happening against the backdrop of a sudden check of the army's combat readiness. Lukashenko abruptly changed his plans, lashed out during inspections, and decided to personally designate the sites for control. According to previous information, the technical support units are to be targeted first and foremost. This is one of the key and largest units in the Belarusian armed forces. It is there that armored systems and large reserves of military equipment are concentrated. The question remains open. Is this real preparation or just another attempt to make a lot of noise about themselves? Or is it once again just a show of loyalty to his friend Putin? It seems that Putin is running out of friends. Kazakhstan is openly throwing Kremlin rules into the trash. And Astana is demonstratively distancing itself from Moscow. The Russian language is losing its monopoly. For the Kremlin, this is a real slap in the face. Another piece of the post-Soviet space is slipping away while propaganda grumbles into its pastry. Central Asia is already on the edge. Now Tokayev is on the fence and the choice could go either way. Alright then, let's take a look at this together.
A new round in the unofficial standoff between Kazakhstan and Russia. In Astana, they struck at the holy of holies for Russian imperialists and Putinists, the Russian language. Russia's neighbors have come up with a plan to completely change the constitution. Kazakhstani politicians have called this process a review of the state's architecture. The draft of the new regulations includes changes to the structure of parliament and an expansion of the rights of citizens and foreigners. The central ideas of the main document are education and science, culture and innovation. But the most discussed amendment, which was picked up by Russian media, is the change in the wording regarding the Russian language.
The Commission on Constitutional Reform of Kazakhstan has introduced amendments to the draft of the new constitution. According to the revised wording, the Russian language will be used not on an equal footing with Kazakh, but alongside it. Despite statements that the amendment is editorial and stylistic in nature, its true meaning will only become clear in practice.
Astana began distancing itself from Moscow immediately after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The presidents of both countries often engaged in diplomatic maneuvering. At times, Putin would forget Tokayev's homeland, while Kasim-Jomart would suddenly force experienced Russian diplomats to scramble for simultaneous translation skills.
First of all, dear Vladimir Vladimirovich, I would like to express my gratitude. Today you have arrived in Kazakhstan on an official visit, accepting my invitation.
And in interviews as well as during joint events in front of a huge audience, the president of Kazakhstan was not shy about reminding everyone. Kazakhs are not the younger brothers of Russians, and the quasi-unions that appeared on the world map with the help of the Russian army, they do not recognize them.
In Russia, some people distort this whole situation, claiming that Russia saved Kazakhstan, and that Kazakhstan must now serve Russia forever and bow at its feet. I believe that these are completely unfounded arguments, you could say, detached from reality.
However, when looking at the broader picture, it has been carefully calculated that if the fundamental right of nations to self-determination were fully implemented and put into actual practice across the entire globe, then instead of the 193 sovereign countries that presently constitute and are recognized members of the United Nations, there would likely be a total of more than 500 or even 600 independent states. Countries. Of course, that would be chaos. For this reason, we do not recognize Taiwan, Kosovo, South Ossetia, or Abkhazia. And it appears quite evident that this very principle will be applied to territories traditionally recognized as part of the state, which, from our specific perspective and assessment, include the regions of Luhansk and Donetsk.
After Russia's full-scale invasion, Kazakhstan became necessary in Moscow. Necessary even. It is precisely through its territory that huge volumes of parallel imports enter the country. The countries share the longest land border in the world, over 7,500 kilometers. And although Tokayev's administration is effectively helping the Russians to wage war, more and more signals from it, as Russian propagandists keenly note, are being sent either to China or to the West. That is why, from time to time, Astana receives threats of a so-called special military operation.
The growing issues and significant problems in our Asia, specifically within Central Asia, as I call it, this could easily become a massive and incredibly complex challenge for us. And we need to very clearly define our goals and objectives. We need to make it clear the games are over. To hell with international law, with the international order. If, for our national security, it was necessary to launch a special military operation on the territory of Ukraine, then why, based on the same considerations, can't we start such operations in other points within our sphere of influence? Maybe we need to formulate our national doctrine and clearly state
what exactly is our specific sphere of influence right now.
Listen, let's still pay attention to the fact that the next problem is Kazakhstan. Because the same, Nazi processes that are happening now in Ukraine could also start there.
The fact that in northern Kazakhstan, where about 2 million ethnic Russians live, there is a potential time bomb in the Kremlin's hands, I understand that, even without Solovyov's threats. The local residents, especially those of retirement age, still watch Russian propaganda.
Whom do you support in the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Russia, of course.
And why is that?
Because Russia is Russia.
How can Russia be the aggressor? It is kind and compassionate. It is fair to all and it helps everyone in the community.
Right here, in northern Kazakhstan, in 2023, 36 supporters of the Russian world tried to declare their autonomy from the center with the intention of later joining Russia. A town of separatists, the local authorities quickly dispersed them. The participants received up to 7 years in prison. Moreover, Kazakhstan has launched a campaign to resettle Kazakhs in the north, supposedly to revive dying villages.
We arrived in the village of Podgornoye, which is probably about half an hour's drive from Petropavlovsk. And it was built specifically for the immigrants who were brought from the south of the country to the north, but by the way, from abroad as well. From
Mongolia. The authorities gave one of these houses plus a 250,000 tenge relocation allowance. Of course, it was not easy, but we made the decision as a family. There are 7 of us, mother, father, and 5 children.
In addition, the authorities of Kazakhstan have stopped turning a blind eye to their citizens' participation in the war against Ukraine on Russia's side. In 2025, a record 709 cases were opened in the country for participation and 28 for tax-related offenses. At the same time, Kazakhstan willingly extradites to Moscow Russians, including military personnel, who have deserted to its territory. So Tokayev is doing everything he can to maintain a balance with the Kremlin and to navigate the moods of his own population.
Even pro-Kremlin Chechnya can't withstand the pressure. The Kremlin is in an uproar. It seems the collapse of the Russian Federation has begun from within. Once Kadyrov is half alive, his own people will finish him off. Putin has fallen into his own clan trap. The thunder of the Kremlin is no longer quiet. Conflicts have erupted, instantly, and a dark cloud is looming over everyone. The struggle for power is turning into a fire that could burn everything around it. It's a game of survival. It has begun within the corridors of power. What happens next? That's the question of the story.
The end of power. TikTok ruler Kadyrov is losing his position. Assalamu alaikum.
Greetings to everyone. It's me again, once more with my phone.
The state of health of the head of Chechnya has rapidly deteriorated, and this has instantly affected the appearance of Putin's vassal. From being athletic, muscular, and confident, Kadyrov is turning into a helpless, constantly tired, and sick old man. About 50% of the equipped gangs, 4 turbo units and white stamps. For several years, the head of Chechnya has been seriously ill, as evidenced by his unhealthy appearance and regular disappearances from the public eye. He stopped doing sports, which had always played a big role in his image, and started wearing looser, baggier clothes. And Donan started appearing in public less often, even though he used to always love being the center of attention.
Life can be really interesting sometimes.
Simply put, Kadyrov doesn't have much time left. His rule apparently is coming.
Everything is coming to an end. Because of this, even in the public sphere, it has become completely forbidden to raise the topic of his poor health. Under the rule of Kadyrov, the local people are now in such a heightened state of constant fear that they are deeply afraid to express any of their personal opinions openly. But do people talk about it in their kitchens, so to speak? Yes, absolutely. There are quite a few clans in Chechnya. Yes, most of them are, in one way or another, affiliated with the Kadyrov clan.
Who will replace Dondan? That question remains open. Essentially, the main successor is considered to be Kadyrov's son, 18-year-old Adam. But a constitutional restriction stands in the way of his appointment, which stipulates that the head of Chechnya must be over 30 years old. Another possible option is appointing a loyal associate of Kadyrov as the head of Chechnya.
In Moscow, as far as we can tell right now, again, by analyzing the public sphere, there are their own candidates to replace Kadyrov. But for now, these are still being considered as working options, and at the same time, they are looking for a person who, on the one hand, understands the local specifics, and on the other hand, is closely connected, let's say, in close working circles. Relationships, primarily with the FSB, along the FSB line, and who can build precisely a Putin-centric position. In other words, to continue doing exactly what Kadyrov was doing.
Moscow's main demand for Ramzan Kadyrov's successor. Chechnya must not become a problem again, especially during the war with Ukraine.
Now, in all likelihood, the central government in Moscow will do everything within its power to suppress any civil actions taken by the local population in Chechnya. This includes any, let's say, determined attempts by the region of Chechnya to gain its own independent legal subjectivity. They will achieve this, including by the use of overwhelming force, and including through the implementation of violent, systematic crackdowns against the people.
What will happen next in Chechnya is unknown. Some political analysts believe that Kadyrov's death could lead to a struggle between clans for power and mass uprisings. Protests.
This could cause major destabilization in the North Caucasus.
Basically, because there is already tension between Chechnya and Dagestan, Chechnya and Ingushetia, and of course when Kadyrov dies, this confrontation could sharply intensify, and all the grievances that Chechnya's neighbors had could be brought up again. Therefore, destabilization in this region is very, very likely.
According to the Institute for the Study of War, the death of the Chechen dictator or his removal from office, if this happens during or immediately after the end of the war in Ukraine, could leave Putin's interests in the North Caucasus unprotected unless a suitable successor is appointed.
A rebellion in Belgorod. The local authorities have turned against Putin. They've been silenced. Demands for reprisals are being made. The main source of joy in the Russian Federation. Russians have the slogan, "Don't bomb Kyiv." Every attack on Ukrainian cities backfires on the Russians themselves. Watch the report for all the details of the hellish split in Russia.
Well, finally it happened. Officials from Russian regions are calling to stop bombing Ukraine because every strike brings retaliation.
Look, everything is on fire over there.
Yeah, I see it.
The governor of Belgorod couldn't hide his emotions over
The shelling that erupted in the city brought a sudden and violent end to the peace, as heavy artillery fire began to rain down across the metropolitan area. Residents were caught completely off guard by the intensity of the bombardment, which quickly filled the streets with thick smoke and falling debris. As buildings shook from the force of the impacts, the urban landscape was transformed into a scene of chaos. This unexpected escalation of hostilities marked a significant turning point in the conflict, leaving the community in a state of shock as they scrambled to find safety amidst the crumbling infrastructure of their neighborhoods.
Moreover, this statement wasn't made in a kitchen, but right in front of his colleagues. Of course, there were some nosy citizens, informers, who immediately reported the governor's words up the chain. The response from above came very quickly.
These are, of course, the words of a traitor, but we will find out whether Gladkov actually said them, and will take action if necessary, the Kremlin responded.
Gladkov's words reek of treason and are unacceptable. So, the Russian elite got tense because none of the high-ranking officials had ever allowed themselves to publicly criticize.
The strategic actions and political maneuvers orchestrated by the Kremlin carry significant weight in today's world. These decisions have a profound impact on international relations and global stability. By examining the specific policies and calculated moves of the Russian government, we can better understand how their influence shapes geopolitical dynamics and the future of diplomacy. He will calm down, and his region, along with the rest of Russia, will continue the difficult but absolutely necessary struggle.
Well, the boomerang effect worked instantly. Unfortunately, this growing trouble has now reached all the way into Russia as well. This situation has very significantly and directly affected the outcome in a major way.
It is important to consider the specific roles and the extensive responsibilities held by the high-ranking officials themselves, who are tasked with overseeing these complex administrative procedures and ensuring that every single policy is implemented correctly across all departments within the entire organization.
The governor is showing his concern that he can no longer solve the region's problems on his own.
The actions our energy and heating specialists have taken over the past 2 days have not yet led to the long-awaited result. Therefore, we are by no means making excuses, but I'm simply explaining the technological complexity of the current situation.
Gladkov even announced a partial evacuation of residents due to problems with water, electricity, heating, and communications, as well as constant
emergency alerts have been issued across the region. Due to the extensive and severe structural damage caused by the recent events, authorities are now taking immediate action.
To the infrastructure, the situation in Belgorod now resembles Kiev and other cities in Ukraine that are being mercilessly bombarded by the Russian army.
The Russian army has carried out a massive strike with high-precision weapons on Ukraine. There are serious heating problems in the cities. In Kyiv, it's currently minus 26 degrees.
Rumor has it that the governor of Belgorod region has repeatedly asked Moscow for additional air defense resources to protect the city. However, the Kremlin replied to him that they do not have such an opportunity.
Blackouts. Electricity is supplied intermittently only for a few hours a day. People are left without electricity, heat, or water.
Do you understand what's happening or not? Does anyone understand this? What happened? Why is all this happening?
It's precisely because of the Kremlin's zero response that Belgorod is freezing without heat or electricity. They don't care about people at all. Not only do they lack air defense, but they've also been deprived of communication means. And here Gladkov appeared again. Telegram was slowed down all across Russia. Accordingly, it doesn't work in the Belgorod region either. Gladkov's Telegram channel has become the main source of information for residents on safety issues.
I'm concerned that the slowdown of the Telegram channel might affect how quickly you receive operational information. If the situation gets worse, after all, we are a frontline region.
Power and heating outages in the Belgorod region began after strikes on the energy infrastructure in early February, and that is how it remains. To this very day.
Boom in Belgorod. every couple of hours.
Following the heavy shelling of the Luch CHP plant, the Belgorod CHP facility, and the Frunzenskaya electrical substation, thousands of residential homes were suddenly left without any essential utilities or power. This devastating disruption has impacted countless families across the entire region, leaving them in the dark during this critical time. Restoring the power supply in some places did not yield the desired results. The long-term wear and tear of the pipes also played a role, so they began draining water from the systems. After his open criticism, Gladkov may become not only a villain in the eyes of the Kremlin elite, but even an English spy and foreign agent. How many more members of the elite are there who, as they say, are tired of the ongoing hostilities? And they will start to speak out. The question remains open.
What do you think about the latest events? Share your opinions in the comments, like the video, and stay up to date with the main news. There's even more ahead.